Whether you're brand new to shooting, you've been shooting for a while, or now you're shooting for so long and you're shooting so well that now you're teaching other people, the 7 fundamentals of firearms marksmanship are kind of like the base mark, or the 7 areas that are the recipe for good and proper shooting. I learned them when I first started shooting. I revisited them when I was going through the police academy, and then I revisited them when I went through firearms instructor school, not just to be a firearms instructor for civilians, but for law enforcement. Each one of these is kind of like a means of diagnosing where somebody is shooting incorrectly. So if it's where, you know, they're aiming at a certain spot and the round is going somewhere else, like, well, let's go to the 7 fundamentals. If well, my sight picture is good and my sight alignment's good, but something else is off, well, let's check your trigger finger, let's check your breathing. And we're going to kind of go through, not in depth, but we're going to go over the 7 fundamentals of firearms marksmanship. What's up, warriors? This is Kyoshi Dave Herman with 5 Elements Tactical Training, here to share with you some warrior skills and drills that anyone can learn and everyone should know. If you're new to the channel, welcome, and thanks for stopping by. If you already follow us on social media and that's how you find your way over to this channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the bell notification button, and YouTube will let you know when the next video drops, so you can get all sorts of cool content from here as well. These fundamentals, while used differently depending on the platform of firearm that you're shooting, like for the way you'll hold a rifle is going to be different than how you hold a shotgun, and it's going to be different than how you hold a pistol. But your stance and your grip and all the other things, there's a method for using each one of those. And the 7 fundamentals are the things that kind of, 1, teach us a good baseline. Make sure that we're using proper form. Form, accuracy, speed, timing. The FAST method, that's something I teach in martial arts all the time that translates into so many other things that I both train in and things that I teach. Using the proper form first, making sure that you're doing it properly, is so fundamental. That's the foundation. You build a strong foundation and the sky's the limit. So using these 7 fundamentals, it's a means for you to learn all the things that you need to pay attention to when you're first starting out. They're the things that you need to revisit when you've been shooting for a while and you're like, man, I'm doing some stuff wrong and I need to correct that. And at some point, if you become a firearms instructor, they're the things that you're going to kind of refer to all the time, to like, all right, I'm watching this guy and all right, I see what's going wrong. Let's put that under a what do you call that thing? Put that under a microscope, and so that the shooter could see what they're doing wrong, and we go back and say, hey man, this is good, this is good, this is good. Boom, let's correct this piece, and it'll help you. And you kind of work it out together. All right, so let's get after it. Okay, so remember that this is an overview. We're not going to go into the 7 fundamentals in depth. We'll have videos later on where we go over each one in its own video, because each one deserves its own one. They're that important. So for today, we're going to go over just the basics. So like I said earlier, your foundation is the foundation, the fundamental thing. And as human beings, our fundamental foundation is our stance. Like how you stand, how you keep your balance, how you keep your focus, how you go about doing stuff on 2 feet, where most other creatures in nature have more than 2 feet. So the first thing that we look at when we're teaching somebody how to shoot or learning how to shoot is a good stance. Now, when I teach police officers that they've been shooting for a lot of years, I'm not going to switch their stance around. I'm not going to change it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if everything else is like, hey, everything's going, is all checking out, but your rounds are going off by a little bit, let's mess with your stance. Let's maybe adjust how you're turning your body, how you shift, how you're holding your shoulders, and we could fine tune that first. The first part of having a good stance is where you put your feet. Then we go to the knees, that there's a little bit of a bend in the legs there. Then your hips, like comfortably placed and comfortably rotated, where you're kind of like facing the target so that everything else will line up accordingly. Your shoulders, your back, how tall you're standing. Are your shoulders kind of lean back? Are they natural? Are they kind of rolled forward? Your head should always you shouldn't be moving your head around. You want your head steady and bring your gun up to your sights. Your sights up to your eyes, rather, not your eyes to the sights. We'll get into that in a moment. Quick safety note before we go any further. I'm in the school alone. All the firearms that you see on the table are unloaded. They've been checked, double checked, triple checked, quadruple checked, that they are all safe and empty. There's no ammunition present in the school, in the building. In the building as far as I know. But everything in here is going to be done safe and empty, just so you know. If you haven't already checked out our video on firearm safety, give it a watch. check it out, watch it twice, pass it on. There's some good information in there, and most importantly, follow the firearm safety rules. No matter where you've heard them, who taught them to you, make sure you watch 1 or 2 or 3 videos on it, but you gotta know them, you gotta learn them, you gotta know them, and most importantly, you gotta follow them. Firearm safety starts with you. The second fundamental is the grip. So, for instance, on a pistol, again, safe and empty, safe and empty, safe and empty. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you get your hand way up into the back strap, or what's called the beaver tail. And, again, I'm not teaching you how to create a firm grip. When you go for firearms instruction, they're going to teach you, and you just make sure that you are consistent across the board with each one of these fundamentals. If you're inconsistent, then that's probably the thing that's throwing you off. When you kind of dial in what works for you, be consistent with it. And then it'll be easier to use these to diagnose what's going wrong, or what's kind of making your shots go off target. So on a pistol, you want to, of course, hold it with 2 hands. There is one-handed shooting, but for beginners, we want to learn how to do everything, as safely as we can. So we get 2 hands on there, and it's important to understand proper grip when holding your firearm. With a pistol, we keep our finger off the trigger. Make sure you watch our video on the 4 cardinal rules of firearm safety. The space that's in here, the meat of your other hand kind of fits in there. My fingers wrap over my other fingers. My second finger or middle finger is right up under the trigger guard. My other hand is right up under the trigger guard, and I kind of marry my hands, trying to get my fingers into my knuckles. On this side, both of my thumbs are on the frame, not the slide. And both of my thumbs are pointed down range. My finger is always off the trigger until I have my target acquired and I have decided to shoot. And that's the grip that I use for pistol shooting. Shotguns. Any long arm, like a gun that you use 2 hands on, ideally you should have 4 points of contact. So you'll have your trigger hand where you have your master grip. Your support hand is going to hold the fore end or the front of the rifle or shotgun. You'll have the gun pressed against your shoulder, so you have 1, 2, 3, and then what's called a cheek weld, how you kind of put your face on the butt of the gun, the buttstock, and then all of those are really part of your grip. But again, you combine that with your stance, and that's how you improve your long arms accuracy and kind of teach fundamentals, review fundamentals, learn fundamentals, and pass on the fundamentals. Okay, so the next fundamental is sight alignment. And what sight alignment means is basically you have a rear sight and a front sight, and it's the relationship that those have with each other, how you line them up correctly, and then place them on the target, and then hopefully maintain that position so that the round that comes out the front of the gun goes where you want it to go. So on a pistol in the back, and there are all different kinds of sights. So some sights are, it might be a line in the back with a dot on the front. All my guns have 2 dots on the back and 1 in the front. They kind of glow in the dark, more or less. They're called night sights. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it so the top of the front sight and the top of the back sight are even. And then, so that's equal height. Then I want the space, like when you line this up, the front sight will be between the 2 ridges of the back sight. So what you're trying to do is equal height, equal light. So what you try to do is have your front sight in the center so that there's equal amounts of light between this side of the front sight and this side of the rear sight, and this side of the front sight and this side. So as it sits in that, when you get your sight alignment, you want, this is very challenging stuff, bang, right there. That's what we're looking for. So equal height, equal light. Again, it's how you line up your front sight and your rear sight and then maintain it on target so that when you depress the trigger, it'll discharge and the round goes exactly where you intended to go. Oftentimes with a student, an instructor will watch a student shoot and see that where the bullets are going and the holes in the targets are going, they'll say, ah, man, it looks like they are, maybe the front sight is a little too high. Maybe the front sight's a little too low. It looks like they're pulling right. It looks like they're pulling left. And oftentimes, we just go over sight alignment to kind of, let's check that out first. Because if that's wrong, well, then we know if that's wrong, we can fix it. And if it's not that, well, we know to look somewhere else in diagnosing somebody's marksmanship. Sight picture. So sight picture is how you, while keeping your sights aligned, place the front sight on the thing that you want to shoot and have it so that different shooters and different instructors will teach it different ways. But ultimately, the thing that is most important of where they tell you to focus it on the target is that the front sight is clear and everything else is blurry. And what I mean by that is your eyes can only focus on one thing at a time. So you get your sight lined up, your target lined up, your sights lined up, everything's in a straight line. And then it's like, well, if I look at the target, the sights are a little bit blurry. If I look at the front sight, the rear sight's blurry and the target's blurry. And if I look at the rear sight, everything else is a little bit blurry because your eye can only focus on one thing at one distance at a time. So once everything is all lined up and you have this right where you want it to go, you focus on the front sight. Now, why we do this, I'm not even sure. All I know is that the more I focus on my front sight, the more my rounds go where I want them to go. And that's good enough for me. So sight alignment is make sure that the front and rear sight are lined up and that they are aimed at the target. Sight picture is focusing on in the background, seeing what you're aiming at, having it blurry, again, depending on how far away it is, but I get a real clear look at it, and then I focus on this, and if everything else checks out, the rounds will really clean up and go more, your accuracy will really improve. That's called sight picture. All right, so the next one is trigger control. Now, trigger control is, there are a lot of parts of trigger control, and this is another one of the areas where when you look at a target and you see that the rounds are going off of, like they're aiming for the center, and if everything else checks out, but they're aiming for the center, and all the rounds are kind of, they're grouping close together, but maybe they're going a little low and a little bit left, but the person's a righty. A lot of times you could like adjust how their finger is on the trigger, or how they're pulling the trigger, or how they're like the grip, like the strength in their grip, how that's affecting their trigger finger and their trigger pull. So proper trigger pull and trigger control is really like a very, I don't know if it's the one that I use most when I'm teaching somebody or coaching somebody or helping somebody improve, but it's used a lot. So if you really use this really strong grip on the gun, it's hard not to have like a strong grip on your index or trigger finger. If you use too light of a grip, it's hard to put pressure with this without putting pressure on that. Part of it is also which part of your finger is making contact with the trigger itself. So if you have your finger all the way through and you kind of like hooking it, and now some people shoot like this and they shoot super accurately. That's not how I learned it. That's not how I do it. That's not how I teach it. But again, if you're doing it and it's working for you, if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it. I'll watch like, wow, you're one of those guys. Could you show me how you do that? Because I'm intrigued by it. You get a good grip. If you are jerking the trigger, you know, it's basically a controlled explosion that's going off in your hand. It's loud. There's a fire that comes out the front. This thing shoots out the side. It's like, you know, your hand jerks all over the place. For new shooters, that's really scary stuff. So they anticipate that explosion, that loud bang, and they start doing all sorts of funky stuff with their hand and their trigger finger. And that's where, like, you'll see them. I'm happy when they hit the paper, when they hit the target. But as they get better and you get more comfortable and you get more control, you really start to fine-tune what you're doing with your trigger finger and really making sure that you're using slow, increasing pressure until, bang, it goes off like a surprise. It's when you jerk the trigger that the rounds are going to go way off. Oftentimes, they'll go in a certain direction that'll tell an instructor how to diagnose what you're doing wrong. But again, trigger control. So again, we'll go into that much deeper in another video. But it's a very important fundamental that you should make sure that you're learning about. If you're a new shooter, if you've been shooting for a while, make sure you review that and kind of like self-diagnose a little bit. See what you're doing wrong. Mess with it. Like if you're not going to be consistent, at least document and research what you're doing and what you're changing and the effects it's having on your round impact. Okay? Trigger control. All right, so the next one is breathing. Now that sounds like such a, what? Breathing, but I breathe all the time. I'm good at that. Well, I often use the analogy of the first time I ever got on an elliptical machine. That's like that cardio equipment thing in the gym where your feet kind of go in this circle and your hands go back and forth. And the first time I got on that, it was really awkward. It was really different, and I wasn't used to it. And I was huffed, man. I was like beat in like 5 minutes. And then once I learned how to breathe properly and move properly, where it wasn't like all awkward and thinking of every single thing that I was doing. It became enjoyable. Easy on my knees, put on the tunes and coast. One of the biggest things when it comes to breathing is remembering to breathe. Again, when you're doing something new, or it's a little bit scary, or you're a little bit hesitant about it, oftentimes what happens is they load up, they get everything ready, and they go like this. And they're trying to do all the other things, but they're not breathing. So if nothing else, just remember to breathe. As you get better at it, like when you teach, like a lot of the things that I go for, classes I go to for training, and when you're teaching, especially law enforcement or reality-based training, we'll do some sprints or some burpees or some other thing first to get your heart pounding and your breathing rate up. So it makes it more challenging because, for real life situation, you love for the thing to just stand there like a piece of paper and you have all the time in the world to figure that stuff out. But in reality, if you're learning firearms for self-defense or home defense purposes, man, your heart's going to be pounding, you're going to be breathing like it's scary stuff. So when you're doing your fundamentals, it's important that you understand the concept of just remember to breathe. If nothing else, just remember to breathe. If you feel like you're getting out of breath, just stop. Take a breath and get back after it. The most important thing when it comes to breathing is remember to breathe. All right, so once you have the first 6, the round goes off. Now we had a good stance, good grip, good side alignment, good sight picture, good trigger control, good breathing. We were remembering to breathe. And the gun goes bang. There's going to be some recoil. Of course, the gun is going to move. You'll probably move a little bit. It's the follow through. Number 7 is follow through. What do you do when all of those things happen and you maintain those 6 basic fundamentals so that you could put more rounds accurately downrange on target? So knowing the first 6 are important. Following the first 6 are important. But maintaining those 6 as you're shooting. Now again, for my most basic beginner students that they've never shot before, they're new to firearms ownership and shooting in general. And it's so much stuff to remember, so don't let it get you overwhelmed. But they're there as like a framework, like an outline for you to use for your own training, for your own practicing, and for your own understanding of like self-diagnosis of, hey man, I'm shooting and the round's going everywhere. Well, you probably got to work on all 7. But if like everything's good and they're going where you want, and then you start to speed up your shooting, like instead of going bang, bang, now you're trying to go bang, 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 and see where those rounds are going. That's where you're going to notice and kind of find out how well you're doing with your follow through. I know when we do timed exercises like for qualification purposes and for training purposes, but timed exercise, all right, you have to do this many rounds in this many seconds. That speed factor throws a lot of people off. And then when they're shooting really slow and there's no pressure and everything's easy, like, oh yeah, they're hitting the target. Wow, they're hitting the middle of the target. Wow, they're like grouping them really well together. And then we say, all right, you got 5 seconds to shoot 5 rounds from the holster. And all of a sudden, they're around like, I don't even think you even hit the target, man. And hey, we're all guilty of it, but the follow-through is the thing. Now, let's go diagnose that. So we diagnose each one by themselves. And when we start to do speed drills or things like that, or reload drills, or things that are kind of take you off your game, let's see how well you reset each of these other 6 fundamentals. Follow-through is number 7. Remember that firearms training and marksmanship, they're all perishable skills. For instance, I had some shoulder surgery, and I hadn't shot for almost a year. And one of my first days back to the range, I had a student, so I went to go teach the class, and I wanted to shoot also because I like shooting, and I missed it. And my student was like, wow, you're a pretty good shot. And when I looked at my target, I was mortified. I'm like, if I was here shooting beside the instructors that I've trained with, I'd have to go home. It was so embarrassing. But it's a perishable skill. You don't do it for a while and you get rusty, you get sloppy, you get messy. But it was a good wake-up call for me and a good reminder for me to go back to the 7 fundamentals. Hey, I need to put some range time in. I need to get some ammunition, get down to the range and just make it a thing till I get back to it. I'm a police officer. God forbid God forbid, you wind up in that moment, every single shot counts. It could be my life or somebody else's. And if you're in a job like that, then you should practice that. You want to go home safe to your family, don't you? So, again, it's a perishable skill. And if you haven't shot in a while and you're just getting back into it, then you go back to the fundamentals. You go back to the basics. You haven't done jiu-jitsu in a while. You're going to go hop in with a beginner class. You're going to go back to like I don't know, golf or something like that. Go out to the driving range. Go out to, I don't play any golf, so if I'm saying that wrong, excuse me. But the point is, shooting's a perishable skill. But when you have a framework or an outline of things to help guide you create good form, good fundamentals, good basics coming in, always revisit that. When I teach martial arts, the first 5 minutes of my beginner class for the youngest kids in the school is the same 5 minutes of the most advanced, most like high-speed dudes that have been training for decades, because that's your fundamentals. Let's get a good, get the warm-up, get the heart going, and let's go back to our basic stances and basic strikes, and let's make sure our basics are sharp, because if the basics aren't sharp, the other stuff won't be sharp. It won't even matter how well you do the other stuff, because without strong basics, it's just not going to work. So if you made it this far and you like what I'm teaching and preaching, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and like this video. If you're loving it, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you got to have it, make sure you hit that bell notification button so YouTube will let you know when the next video drops. If you're really digging it and you want more, you can find us on all social media platforms at 5 Elements Tactical. Well, that's all I got for now, Warriors. So until our paths cross again, pray for the best, prepare for the rest. I'm Kyoshi Dave Herman with 5 Elements Tactical Training. Thanks for watching.